A black teen's innocent walk home turns into a tense confrontation when a racist woman calls the police, accusing him of being suspicious. But when his mother arrives, ready to fight for her son, everything changes, and the woman who set it all in motion is forced to confront the consequences of her own prejudice. It was late afternoon in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people take pride in their neatly manicured lawns and the quiet hum of everyday life. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the rows of homes. Birds chirped as they settled in for the night, and the streets were mostly empty, save for the occasional car driving by. A black teen, no older than 16, walked down the sidewalk, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His steps were casual, just another ordinary day for him, making his way home after school. He didn't notice the woman sitting on her front porch, watching him closely from behind her large, oversized sunglasses. The woman was in her mid-40s, dressed in a crisp blouse and tailored slacks, her posture rigid with an air of superiority. She had always considered herself a model citizen in the neighborhood, polite, well-spoken, and seemingly respectful of everyone she encountered. But there was something in the way she narrowed her eyes as she watched the teen pass by, something that suggested she saw more than just a young boy on a walk. She saw someone she deemed out of place. Her gaze followed him with an unsettling intensity, and a small, disapproving frown crept across her face. Something about the teen didn't sit right with her, and as her mind raced, she made a decision that would change everything. The woman sat on her porch, her eyes never leaving the teen as he walked down the street. At first, she told herself it was nothing more than a passing glance, but something about his presence made her uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way he was dressed. A simple hoodie and jeans, his backpack sagging slightly from one shoulder. Maybe it was the way he walked, his head down, earbuds in, oblivious to the world around him. To her, it didn't seem like the behavior of someone who belonged in this neighborhood. Her suspicion grew with each passing moment. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He didn't seem like the type of person who would belong in a quiet suburban area like this. She convinced herself that he must have been up to no good, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Her grip tightened on the railing of her porch as her mind raced. It only took a few seconds before she reached for her phone, dialing the number she knew by heart. She hesitated for only a moment before speaking into the receiver. "There's a young man walking down my street, and he's acting suspicious. He doesn't belong here," she said, her voice cold and decisive. Meanwhile, the teen continued down the sidewalk, completely unaware of the woman's watchful eyes or the growing tension. His mind was on other things. School, friends, maybe a game he'd been planning to play later. His pace didn't change as he walked, blissfully ignorant of the storm that was about to unfold. Within minutes, the unmistakable sound of sirens filled the air. The teen's heart skipped a beat as 2 police cars pulled up to the curb, their lights flashing, casting bright blue and red streaks across the quiet street. He stopped in his tracks, wondering if he had done something wrong. But before he could process, 2 officers approached him, their expressions stern and their postures rigid. "Hey, you!" one of the officers barked. "Stop right there. We need to talk to you." The teen froze but remained calm. "What's going on, officer?" he asked, his voice steady. He wasn't sure why they were suddenly approaching him, but he had nothing to hide. "You're walking around here acting suspicious," the second officer said, eyeing him carefully. "What's your name? Where are you headed?" "I'm just walking home," the teen replied, trying to keep his composure. "I live just a few blocks down. I'm not sure what the problem is." The officers exchanged a glance, their skepticism clear. "You sure you're not causing trouble around here?" the first officer pressed. The teen shook his head. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to go home." Meanwhile, from her vantage point on the porch, the woman watched the scene unfold with a smug, self-satisfied expression. She had called the police for a reason, and it seemed like things were going exactly as she had hoped. She crossed her arms, confident that the officers would handle the situation, and the teen would be sent on his way. Shamed, perhaps, but certainly not in the way he had expected. Just as the tension in the air grew thick, and the officers seemed ready to take the situation further, a car turned onto the street. The sound of the engine broke through the charged silence as it slowly rolled to a stop just behind the police cars. The teen's eyes flicked to the car, relief washing over him as he recognized the familiar vehicle. It was his mom. The car's door swung open, and out stepped his mother. She was a confident, poised woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back neatly into a bun, wearing a smart jacket and slacks. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect without needing to demand it. As soon as her heels hit the pavement, her sharp eyes immediately took in the situation. The two officers surrounding her son, the tense expressions on their faces, and the woman still sitting on her porch, watching the scene unfold with a sense of satisfaction. Without hesitation, the mother strode toward the group, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, officers," she called out, her eyes locked on the two men. "Why are you questioning my son?" The officers looked taken aback for a moment, but the woman's commanding presence left them no room for hesitation. The teen stood a little straighter, feeling a flicker of hope. His mother had arrived, and with her, the situation was about to change. She turned to the officers again, her voice unwavering. "I'd like to know exactly why you're stopping him, and what grounds you have for this." The officers glanced at each other, the uncertainty now creeping into their expressions. The racist woman, still perched on her porch, stiffened. This was not how she imagined this would play out. The woman, still sitting on her porch, watched with growing discomfort as the mother approached. Her confident stance faltered slightly as the situation began to shift. She had expected the officers to back her up, but the mother's presence was undeniable, and her questions were unyielding. "I don't understand," the mother said, her voice steady, but a fire behind her words. "Why are you detaining my son? What exactly did he do wrong?" She looked directly at the officers, challenging them to explain. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to answer. They hadn't expected this level of confrontation. One of them shifted his weight, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice lacked conviction. "Well, ma'am, we got a call about someone acting suspicious, just trying to make sure everything's okay." "Suspicious?" The mother's eyebrow arched. "My son has been walking down this street for years. He's doing nothing more than going home. Are you saying because of his appearance he's suspicious?" The officers grew visibly uncomfortable, the tension in the air thickening. The woman who had called the police shifted uneasily in her seat, realizing the momentum was not on her side. Her confidence began to waver. I just thought," she began, but the mother cut her off, her gaze sharp. "You thought he didn't belong here because of the color of his skin, didn't you?" Her voice was calm, but the accusation hung heavy in the air. The woman stammered, her earlier smugness evaporating, as she found herself exposed. The officers, now questioning the validity of her call, exchanged glances, realizing they had been sent out based on a baseless complaint. The mother didn't let up. "Your assumptions and racism have caused my son unnecessary distress. That's not just suspicious. That's harmful. And now, I'm asking you to leave us alone." The woman's face flushed with embarrassment as the weight of the situation settled in. The smugness that had once radiated from her now faded into a nervous, unsure expression. Her initial certainty, her belief that she was justified in her actions, began to crumble. The officers, who had once seemed so certain, now appeared uncomfortable and hesitant. The realization that she had made a baseless call was sinking in, and it hit harder than she anticipated. Her gaze flicked to the mother, who stood tall and composed. The calm strength in her demeanor made the woman's earlier confidence seem hollow. She had expected to see the teen in trouble, perhaps even punished. But instead, the roles had shifted entirely, and it was she who stood in the spotlight of scrutiny. The mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were measured, deliberate. "This is what happens when we allow assumptions to guide our actions," she said, her tone unyielding yet calm. "When you judge someone based on the color of their skin, not only do you hurt them, you harm the entire community. You sow distrust, fear, and division. And for what? A misguided suspicion based on nothing but prejudice." The woman's lips parted, but no words came out. She was silenced by the truth. The officers, now visibly uncomfortable, exchanged looks before one of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, we apologize for our involvement," he said, his voice softer now. "We were misled by the call, and we realize it was unfounded." The woman's cheeks burned as the reality of her actions sank in. She had acted out of fear and bias, and the consequences were unfolding before her. The mother's stern yet composed words had cut deeper than any reprimand. She realized, too late, that her assumptions had hurt not just the teen, but had tainted the trust she thought she had in her community. The officers, now realizing their mistake, exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them stepped forward, his voice softer than before. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding," he said, his eyes briefly meeting the teen's. "We were called out on a suspicious activity report, but we see now there's been no cause for concern." The mother nodded, her expression still firm but composed. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "But this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was about bias, about seeing my son not as a person, but as a stereotype. And that's something that needs to be addressed by everyone." The officers nodded in acknowledgement, their demeanor shifting from defensive to remorseful. They realized they had been misled by an assumption, one rooted in prejudice, and they had acted without considering the bigger picture. As the mother and son turned to leave, the woman on the porch remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. The pride and smugness that had once defined her expression had disappeared. In its place, a heavy realization took hold. Her actions had consequences, not just for the teen, but for herself as well. She would have to live with the knowledge that her assumptions had caused harm, and that thought weighed on her more than she had expected. The mother placed a hand gently on her son's shoulder as they walked away, the weight of the day's events settling in. Her heart ached, knowing this wasn't the first time she had to defend her son from prejudice, but she was grateful the situation had been diffused. As they walked side by side, she looked down at him, offering a reassuring smile. The woman on the porch remained frozen in place, her mind racing. Would she ever confront her biases? Could she ever change? The thought lingered, unanswered, as the mother and son disappeared down the street.